This episode is sponsored by Kendo UI. Kendo UI allows you to build better apps faster. They have a comprehensive library ranging from data grids and charts to buttons and sliders. Plus, you can use their components as plain JavaScript as well as in Angular, React, and Vue. They have a large collection of customizable popular themes like Bootstrap and Material. Go check them out at javascriptjabber.com/KendoUI. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel we have Aimee Knight.
Hello from Nashville.
AJ ONeal.
Yo, coming at you live from sunny Provo.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv, and this week we have a special guest, and that's Dotan Nahum.
Hey guys.
Do you want to say hello? Introduce yourself?
Yep. Sure. So I'm Dotan. I'm from Tel Aviv, doing open source for a while. Did this tool recently called Hygen. Recently worked for Klarna. Now starting joining a new company called HireScore.
Cool. Yeah, we brought you on today to talk about Hygen and code generators. Do you want to just give us the quick elevator pitch for Hygen?
Yeah, so Hygen is a code generator, but it's not a scaffolding sort of generator like, let's say, Yeoman or Cookie Cutter if you're coming from Python. It's a code generator that lives in your code, so it's embedded into your workflow, and it really it wants to be very performant. It is simple, and also it has to be very flexible. So these are the three core values that I've built Hygen around.
Nice. And I love code generators. So I kind of grew up in Ruby on Rails.
Yeah.
And it has code generators built into it. And that is just kind of a critical automation.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, I think I started doing Rails in 2006, back when the blog post demo, build your own blog in whatever it was, 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So that was the wow. In 2006, I think, what you had to use if you wanted to build a product on the web was in Java, maybe Struts or JSF, and .NET, you had .NET 2, and PHP was sort of considered cutting edge. And Python had SherryPy, which was really not usable. If you wanted to build something on the web. And then Rails came, and it really was miles ahead everything. And this whole concept of using a tool to actually help you develop something was, for me, it was mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. So this is something I think I carried, take it 12 years into the future. This is something, a wow moment I'm carrying with me. I think since then, and that's definitely something I hijacked. I mean, I wanted the Rails generators everywhere. So the whole Rails tie and Rails generators are built on Thor. So the whole package, I wanted it in the front-end world, and that's how Hygen came to be.
Very cool. Now, just to clarify some of the capabilities here, and I'm going to work off of my experience with various code generators. Incidentally, you also have things like the Angular CLI. They're adding in schematics, which sounds like it's pretty similar to this.
Right.
So you can generate a file. Can you also modify files with your code generator, like insert a line or something like that? Or is it just complete files at this point?
Definitely. So basically everything from Rails, you have there. And I didn't just copy it as is. I just remembered the good things you have in Rails generator, like the ability to inject gems, right? So that's something that you get built in. So I just took that idea in Rails and made it generic. So in Hygen, you can inject whatever. You can inject gems or you inject packages for your package.json file if this is a front-end project. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely. Totally, Rails was the inspiration.
So my question, I read your post on Medium about using this alongside Create React. I cannot talk today. I've been getting over a cold. Create React app. Do you want to talk about how this pairs nicely with that?
Yeah. So I guess when you want to think about boilerplate, you say Redux, right? Or the other way around. When you say Redux, you think about boilerplate. So when Redux came out with the whole Flux idea, it is a very tiny library, but it does lead you into building scalable or modular architectures for front-end apps. And the idea that a front-end app has an architecture is already something that is, if I could say, groundbreaking. But when you think about an architecture, then you have a lot of building blocks. And when you think about a lot of building blocks, then you have, I guess, boilerplate. So it's sort of like, it fuels both sides. So with Redux, you have quite a few files you probably want to have in your Redux app, and probably a lot of repetition, which is less than ideal. And there are plenty of libraries to solve that, like they generate code for you, but they just, in my opinion, they just hide away things that you might want in the future. For example, there are plenty of libraries that will hide away the action constants, because that's very easy to do things to do. It's very intuitive to hide them away under a function. But there is this, let's say, rare, but this scenario exists where you might want to tear apart a chunk of your application and drop it in a package somewhere, and then have your main application host that part. And now, if you ask yourself how does these two parts communicate, then the answer is by constants. And then you would, if you use any abstraction, any library that hides this away, at that point you would drop it and then go back to manually coding your constants. So that is just one example. So in order to avoid that, I bumped into these use cases, and the solution I came up with is to generate code. And that actually lets you enjoy both worlds. So if you take Redux and if they create React app, and you combine the two, and you also add in the idea that in today's front-end world, you make a component so you can generate that component, but then you also have to have a test, and you have to have a storybook, and so on and so forth. So a component is really an array of files and an array of assets that you would generate. Part of these are like, the standard React thing, like storybook and tests and whatever. And part of this, a good part of that, would be the Redux infrastructure for that component, for that page, or whatever. So that is how everything fits together.
I can see how that would be helpful. I think especially, from a newer developer standpoint, if you have people on your team and they create a component, like, you just know, if I create a component, I have to write a test for it. The file is there.
Yeah. And actually, it also rhymes well when let's say a team is running for a while, and then this team develops its own set of principles for doing components. Let's say they only used style components for styling, or JavaScript styles, or CSS, or whatever. If you want to onboard someone, then you actually don't need to onboard someone. You just have the generators, and these guide the new team member through all of the principles of the team. And if you want to standardize this, for example, if you want to create a standard UX guideline, or create a storybook that is actually the kitchen sink for everything, then you can actually bake in the asset you need to generate in order for this to exist. So I would generate a standard, let's say, kitchen sink version of my component. So I wouldn't need to build it manually, it would just be generated for me. And then I take my component and the generated code just plugs it into the kitchen sink. So it's just like, it's a force multiplier. And what you can do with it, because JavaScript lets you have all this freedom, you can actually plug, through generating code, you can plug everything you do into the existing workflow and also onboard new people into whatever you're doing for the last year, for example.
The other thing that comes to mind with this is not just the example of having a standardized way of doing components or a standardized look and feel to components, but also let's say that I want to get going with, I don't know, Redux and GraphQL, and I want them to talk nicely together. I'm going to use Apollo. I could use Hygen to generate the glue code between them, right? Because it's going to be pretty similar between all of them. Similarly, if I'm then going to plug in some authentication system on the back end in Express, and I want that authentication system to play nicely on the front end, then I can also run generators for both of those. And so if there are common features that you're pulling together, then it can use the generators in order to build those out.
Right.
One thing I'm wondering though is, if let's say that I generate on the front end that authentication piece, so I have a login link or something like that, and I also have this common look and feel for components, can I stack those up so that Hygen will say, this is my common component framework, and then this is my authentication framework, and I'm going to merge them?
Let me see if I understood you. So when you say framework, what do you mean?
So framework's probably a poor term. Template. So I have a template for the the login component, and then I have another template for just components so that I get the common look and feel. Is there a way to put those together so it'll run them both together?
Yeah. So the structure of so let's take a step back for a moment. So if you even wanted to do this, right? If you had your project and then you said to yourself, oh, this is a nice idea, I want to generate code, whatever, what would you do? So the basic thing for, let's say, a front developer, the first thing that goes into your mind is probably Yeoman, which was very, very big, like I think in 2012. It's probably still widely used. But the thing is with Yeoman is that you use it when you want to scaffold an entire project. So then you would create a new project, a Yeoman project, which is a separate thing. You would, you would inject your ideas into it, and suddenly it becomes a new product. So you have your own thing that you're working on, but then you have a new thing, which is a generator. And the whole thing doesn't flow because you go into your day job, you do your work, and then you jump into your generator project and you start doing the tweaks, and then you need to build it and release it, and then go to your day job project and then pull it and then see how everything works. It doesn't work. And especially when this is a team. So with Hygen, since everything lives inside your day job project, you just go into your templates folder, which is already there, drop a few files, and then you have a new generator. And that's it. So to come back to your question, the thing is the templates folder that Hygen scans is structured in a way that the folder is the generator, and every file is just an action. So you would do, let's say, if we take the Rails example, so you have Rails model new, whatever, then you would just make a folder called model and a folder called new, and then drop whatever files you want in there. So the directory structures automatically maps into the command structure. So this is like an opinionated thing I had to choose in order to not complicate, to overcomplicate things. So yeah, you can stack these. You can even execute a few generators. This is something that someone requested. But yeah, definitely.
Gotcha. So basically what you're saying is that I could have the login component generator call the component generator, and if I modified the component generator, it'll put all the pieces in the right place, because the component generator knows where the general component pieces go, and the login component generator knows how to fill in the rest of the component.
Yeah. So you can build your generator however you want it, and you can also have, I'm not sure if this exists in Rails, but you can have a shell action. So the various templates follow a set of actions. So in each template, you can do an action. So an action is an inject action,
right,
and file addition action. So there's also a shell action, which is it's just a way out. If you want to do something not standard, if you want to run grep, if you want to run a gem install or a yarn install, whatever, you can just execute a shell command, and that is a shell template. So you can do whatever. You can make a generator that calls a generator whatever. As long as it's a standard shell command, you can model it however you want.
Yeah, that's effectively how the Rails scaffold generator works, where it calls a bunch of other generators, right? So it inserts the route into the routing file, and it creates all the style sheets and creates and all of those are generators on their own, the scaffold controller generator and all that stuff. Those are all just generators that it calls. Yeah.
That's cool.
So is there a way for me to share my generators in a separate package?
Yeah. So initially, there's another principle that I've used with Hygen, which is something I borrowed from the Go community. So with Go, or how Go was developed, is that they set out a certain feature set that they were sure they can build. They know how to build and effectively release. For example, they didn't do generics, and they didn't do, at first, they didn't do dependency management. They left it for the community. So when I first built Hygen, I knew there's something I'm not sure I know how to solve, which is how to share packages. Because there are probably like 5 or 6 ideas that I can have for how people can do it. But I didn't have this one correct way to do it that I was certain it is the way. So I just didn't do it. So I released Hygen, and then I started getting like feature requests for people wanting to share packages. And then this guy approached and showed the tool he built on top of Hygen that does this. And then I just embraced it, and that is the best way to do it. It's called Hygen-add. And that I also realized through that instead of baking these things into Hygen, I can leave it simple. The whole code base, I can leave everything as simple as it is, and then have satellite tools to follow whatever you want. So if you want the capability for packages, then you use Hygen-add, which is a completely different tool. If you just want Hygen, you use Hygen. And there's also Hygen-create, which is a tool that scans your existing components as you wrote them, and it will generate a template out of it automatically. This was done by a guy called Ron. Amazing project. If you have right now whatever component you have, you just give it the name of the component, it scans the component, and just extracts a template from it, and that's your new generator. So this approach works well, and it allowed me to just build a simple code base that is very nice to go back into every time and maintain it. Was just awesome.
When you start a new project, typically you need things like a domain name, hosting, things like that. When I choose hosting, I pick mine for the options it gives. I like to know what I'm getting and set things up just how I like them. This is why for your projects, you should check out Linode. Linode servers feature native SSD storage, a 40 gigabyte network, and Intel E5 processors. That's all the power you need to run VMs under full control, or Docker containers. Who doesn't love that? encrypted disks, and VPNs. Plus, they have 10 data centers across the world and add-ons like backups, Node Balancer, and Longview to help you control your server costs. They also offer block storage for your static files, and you can get started with a $20 credit if you use the code JavaScript Jabber 2018. That credit is good for 4 months on their 1 gigabyte server. That's a lot of time to try them out and see if they're the right fit for you. That code again is JavaScript Jabber 2018. Also, if you're interested in working for Linode, they're hiring. Head to linode.com/careers to see their available positions.
So how did you start getting people, because like the community of React and Redux and all that is so big. How did you start carving out a section of community to bring to Hygen and to get those followers and that community contribution and involvement?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is that Hygen is or was supposed to be a very, very small tool out of a complete stack. So at the time, I was trying to build Rails over Node.js. So I guess when someone hears this sentence is a bit funny because there are probably 8 Rails clones in Node.js. But when I tried using every of the other clones or the ports or the project that were inspired by Rails, they all felt maybe not baked, maybe deserted, whatever. You can check this out. Like there's sales trails and probably more forks of the same project. There's feathers, there's whatever. I don't recall everything, but there's plenty of projects. And I felt that none of them were simple enough for my use. So what I decided to do is to take Express and to take and to hunt down very solid Node.js libraries and add just a very minimal amount of DSL or API or boilerplate code that turns them into, let's say, a Rails-like component. So, for example, I took Sequelize, which is a standard and very robust Node.js ORM, and just added enough sugar on top of it to look like Active Record. I didn't invent my own ORM like the other Rails-inspired projects out there. I just took whatever there was. I added maybe 100 lines of code, and it became so much more easy to use. So that was my active model. And then I took the whole routing idea in Express and made it more, ESX, and then I made it more like a very humane DSL on top of it to behave a little bit like the Rails routes. So all of that was maybe 50 lines of code. So then I just moved step by step like that, building very tiny libraries that give you the maximum impact. And then I bumped into the idea of generators. And I built Hygen, and that was supposed to be it. But when I released it, there was like this unexpected, it was completely unexpected. People sent me emails and issues and feature requests. It was so overwhelming that I immediately was just around Hygen for like a few good months. The whole stack is still work in progress. If you really snoop around and go on my GitHub and search for hyper, just that word, you will probably see all of the components out there. But I'm still building it, and yeah, that's the story. So I never really targeted audience. Just built a tool that scratched my own itch, and I guess it really struck other people's problems as well.
So do you want to walk through, because we keep bringing up Rails, I want to make sure that we talk through something that people are more familiar with. So is there a way that you use this? Aimee mentioned the Medium post about how you use it with Create React app. So you want to just talk through how you use it with a React app or an Angular app or a Vue app or something like that?
Yeah, so basically you need to have a problem first, right? So if you have a small code base and you're pretty happy with it and the developer experience is pretty good, then you probably don't need that. You don't need any code generator that will help you along the way. But if you have a big team, if you have one project with multiple teams, maybe 10 teams like I had, then you probably totally need a code generator. So the way you would use that in a Redux project is you would probably take your various Redux elements, like actions, action creators, whatever, all the boilerplate, and then create generators per something. So this something would be, if you model your Redux app in a way that every feature is a module, then you would have a generator per feature, and that depends on your app architecture. So this is how I model my apps. So I do this like per feature. I have an entire world of content per feature, so that is where the generators help me. So if I want a new feature, I would just generate it with the entire folder structure, with the entire boilerplate files, everything. So if you don't have this, let's say, deep architecture style in your Redux apps, then you probably can make do with generating components. Only that has its own boilerplate. So you need to have your tests, your storybooks, etc. And that's the first thing that goes into my mind when I'm thinking about, let's say, React app. Vue is probably similar. Angular, with my short experience, I guess that would be services and views and templates. You could generate those. And that's just shooting from my hip, I guess.
Makes sense to me.
Thanks for that.
I'm also imagining things like Docker files and build scripts and Webpack configs and all the other stuff that isn't specific to a framework.
Yeah, you could generate a scaffold. So like every other generator. So Hygen wouldn't offer a very big advantage here, because you could take like cookie cutter from Python and model your scaffold on cookie cutter. I guess the only advantage that Hygen would offer here is that you could bake all of that as part of your project. You don't need to jump into a different folder or to jump into someone else's project, which is a completely dedicated generator project that someone maintained once, a year ago or something. And then you need to get up to speed and understand how everything is built. And this becomes an entire software project on its own. So with Hygen, it's just part of the day-to-day. So there is very little chance you wouldn't bump into a pull request that doesn't have like this template inside it. So, and that's another thing. So when you build your own generator as a separate project, so how can you guarantee that it goes through every standard that you have in your team? So if you submit a pull request, then people would review the code for the feature, but they wouldn't review the code that generated this code. So with Hygen, you can review everything in a one stop under the same pull request. And that guarantees that your generator is always up to date and maintained and fresh, which is a huge pain point with a generator that you have to build a project for. So my Yeoman projects are so deserted. I mean, every time I built a Yeoman project, it was a great experience at the start. But half a year forward, and it becomes this project you don't want to touch. So that feeling, I hate it. And that is one thing I wanted to solve with Hygen.
Got it. So what's coming next in Hygen?
So let me see. I actually have like a list with requests from the top of my mind. A VS Code integration. so that you could just, issue a command. You could have a drop down of all of your generators. You would select one, and then you would input your variables, parameters, and it would use VS Code to generate code for you. So you don't need to drop to shell, and you don't need to remember your generators or list them manually in your shell. Everything as part of your VS Code experience.
That sounds pretty awesome, actually. Yeah. I'm usually more of a command line person, but the more I work in Visual Studio Code, the more I love it. So.
Yeah. I'm also like a hardcore CLI. I used Vim and then NVim, but there's something about VS Code. I also used Atom with Vim mode for a very long time and denied myself going to VS Code. But there's something about VS Code that is very mature, but really it comes from a team that, I guess, built or a team that knows the team that built Visual Studio. So, yeah, also when I looked at the API for VS Code, they were great. So I'm looking forward to actually build this into VS Code because I know I'll bump into a very nice API to work against. So yeah, that's one thing. Another thing that I plan to do is to build a reporter infrastructure. So when Hygen runs, it goes through a few stages. So let's skip ahead and think about the value I want to get from this. So I want to get, for example, how many files were generated, how long did it take, how much time did I potentially save for you. So, and this is all heuristics, right? So if it takes me 5 minutes to manually build a component, a React component, and maybe, let's say, 10 minutes to write a test for this and a storybook for this component, then all in all, these are like order of 20 minutes that slowly crept through my day-to-day. And I'll have these probably 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And all these become something that you can accumulate and put a finger on and say, oh, all this boilerplate takes so much from my day-to-day. So here's a tool that I can use that, strike those out. So eventually I want to get to a point that Hygen tells you how much time it saved for you. And for that to happen, I need a reporter infrastructure in it. So I need to actually trace all of the stages and output them in a standard format, for example, JSON, and then have this nice data structure that I could turn into a table that tells you how much time was spent. Or, and this is a bigger idea, imagine if you have a big team or maybe 10 teams, each of these using Hygen, and you take this reporter infrastructure and connect it to Google Analytics, and now you have analytics over your usage of code generators. So if you manage a team and you go to your Google Analytics and you open it up and you see, 500 components generated this week, or maybe 20 pages generated, or whatever, suddenly it becomes this new thing. It's completely new. I mean, I didn't see anything like that out there. But think about Google Analytics for your code. So that is fascinating for me. I can't wait to start building this. So this is another big thing that I plan to do with Hygen. And there's also an idea to build a Hygen server. So this is a separate process that is always on. And the idea is that it should shorten the, let's say, 130 milliseconds it takes for Hygen to start up and generate something. This is from the benchmarks I'm always running. So it takes around 130 milliseconds. And if I have like a daemon always running in the background, and then I have a command line communicating with it, I can probably shorten it to around 50 milliseconds. And it might sound strange that I'm doing these optimizations, but I do believe that when you optimize your UX to do under 100 millisecond latencies, because 100 millisecond is the perceived, is the amount of time that humans can perceive slowness. I believe that is true for command line too. So I want to be below 100 milliseconds. So this is another thing I plan to do with Hygen. And a few other small things. And there's also something that is not connected to Hygen, but is part of the work that I did there. So the documentation site Hygen has, turns out it can be pretty generic. So I'm going to extract it all and build a new project out of it that anyone can take and generate a documentation site for his open source tool or library or whatever. So all these are in the work. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm just going to encourage people to go check it out. And I think we need to push into picks. So is there anything else that people should know, or are there ways that the people can follow you on, say, Twitter or GitHub, or maybe you have a blog somewhere, things like that?
Well, yeah. You can follow me on Twitter, GitHub, or anything really under John Dot. That is JONDOT. That's basically it.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do some picks then. Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Aimee, do you have some picks for us?
I do. So the first one, and I might just stick at this one today because I thought it was actually really good. It's called Deep Copying in JavaScript. And a lot of people, I think, that are new to JavaScript, and this is like a fairly common thing that you want to do. I think not everybody realizes that like spread and stuff like that doesn't do a deep copy. So this is on Surma's blog. He's a developer advocate for Google. And I don't know, he went through and tested out various options of like deep copying. Like you can use JSON.parse and you pass JSON stringify to that. And that actually was usually the best option for deep copying, which you would think maybe it wouldn't necessarily be. Anyways, it was kind of a rabbit hole of a blog post, but I like this kind of stuff and I found it kind of informative. So that's going to be my pick for today. And I feel like I need to apologize to listeners for my voice because it's really bad.
Doesn't sound that bad from here.
It's getting a little bit better, but it's been pretty bad.
All right. AJ, what are your picks?
So first and foremost, I think I will pick Let's Encrypt. For those that don't know, they came out with a version 2. So it's actually Acme Draft 11, but it's lots of people are calling it version 2. It's actually Acme Draft 11. Anyway, and I've been playing with the API for that and updated the client that I have in Node for it. And it just makes me happy that we have free SSL on the web. And so we'll pick Let's Encrypt. And then I will also pick, again, the Nintendo Switch and Breath of the Wild. It's been a while, like almost a year, but I picked it back up again. I still haven't finished it. I got in this fervor where I was playing it all the time, and then I just got focused again and had literally did not play it for, I don't know, more than 6 months, and finally picked it back up, and I'm trying to figure out where I am again so I can, continue on my hero's journey, and I can't, but I love it. So I'll pick that again. And that is all for today.
Nice. I'm going to jump in with a couple of picks. So it looks like I got a 50-50 chance of going to FluentConf. So if you're going to be at FluentConf, let me know. I'm looking to do some podcast episodes, kind of like we've done in the past for Microsoft events. And I'm just kind of trying to find a sponsor for that. So if you are interested, or your company is interested in sponsoring me to go out and do those podcast episodes, I'll do a shout out and things like that. But yeah, if you're interested in that, let me know.
Yes,
and then,
do that, because I'll be there too, and I want to see you, Chuck.
Yeah, Amy's fun to hang out with. Of course, at NG Atlanta, I think we spent a grand total of 45 minutes together. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'll let you carry on.
No, it's all good. We actually did an interview out there, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Besides that, I have another pick. I'm going to pick Hotjar, and Hotjar is kind of a heat mapping tool for your applications, and I'm really digging it. So I'm going to pick that as well. And then the devchat.tv website got a new theme. I've been using the newspaper theme probably for the last month, and I've been pretty happy with that. Looks good. I'm adding new features as we go, so I'm going to pick that as well. And the last pick I have is Ethereum, and I've been kind of tinkering with it. I need to finish tinkering with it and write my talk for Ruby Hack. I'm going to be speaking at Ruby Hack on blockchain and Ruby. But anyway, that's just another thing that I've been fiddling with and liking. So anyway, those are my picks. Dotan, what are your picks?
Yeah, so do you guys know ASDF?
No.
Yeah, it's a tool that is, it's just the letters A, S, D, and F on your keyboard, like in that order, ASDF.
I thought it was like when I'm just typing gibberish on my keyboard, those are usually the letters.
Yeah.
So
JKL colon.
I'm pretty happy that you don't know that, because it's going to change your life. So I don't know why it's not that popular, or people don't notice it that much. But I'm using, Python, Ruby, Node.js, Swift, all in the command line. Every platform has its own, manager. Like you have Ruby, and you have RVN, and you have RBenv, and you have NVM for Node, and you have virtualenv for Python. So ASDF is a tool. It's just one tool that does all of that for all of the languages you probably can imagine. So you just use that. So if you want Node.js, you just do ASDF plugin add Node.js. It adds the capability to do Node.js. And then you say ASDF, I think Node.js install whatever version you want. And it does it as well as let's say, RBenv. And it does the shimming perfectly, and no magic tricks on your command line or environment. Everything works just perfectly. So I moved to that, I think maybe a year ago, but just now I made a new build for a new computer. And through that, I was able to just delete all of the custom RBN, RVM, whatever NVM code I had in my dot files, and my dot files is empty. It's just ASDF. So go ahead, try it. It's amazing.
That sounds really nice, especially where I do Rails, right? And then I have Node.js installed so I can do my front-end builds, whether I'm using Webpack or something else. And Ruby actually has hooks now into Webpack. But, same thing with Elixir and Phoenix, or, whatever other tools that I need. A lot of times I need a node alongside whatever else I'm doing. And so, yeah, this sounds really great, because then I can just specify what I need for a particular project, and I don't have to fiddle with, I forgot to NVM over, even though I'm already using the right RBN or whatever for Elixir.
Yeah, and it's a one-stop shop. I mean, if I want to try Elixir right now, it's just one command, and I don't need to go and read the whatever environment manager for Elixir is, and see how to install it and see how it works and how to integrate it into my shell. And it's all basically, if you think about it, it's all basically the same code base, only different. For NVM, it's probably the same as RBenv. And I think I don't remember which language took from which language, but I think there was this one language who just copied RBenv and changed it. But yeah, it's the same code base. So it's just this one of those tools that you think, why didn't they make it? Why didn't they think about it earlier? So it's amazing. Really, really recommend it.
Yeah. The other thing that I always run into is, did I install this with Brew, or did I install it from source, or did I install it? Yeah. And so they all come in from the same system. So that sounds nice too.
Right. So
anyway, I'll stop riffing on your pick. This looks really great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else you want to throw in before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I mean, you just said Brew, so you have Brew and you have Brew Cask, but you also have Brew MAS, which is MAS. And if you ever installed, you can install command line apps with Brew, but you can also install desktop apps with Brew Cask. But how do you install apps that come from the Apple Store? Right?
Mm-hmm.
This is something that is, for a while, I didn't have a solution for. So there's this tool called MAS, M-A-S. It's also open source. I think it's written in Ruby. And it does all the magic, to go to the App Store and do the install for you. So basically, you can just add these lines to your Brew file. And now you have Brew installing your command line apps, installing your desktop apps, and installing your Mac apps through App Store. So if you didn't know about it, then now you know.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming and talking to us. We're going to go ahead and wrap this one up, and we will catch you all next week. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.